So if you would, I think it would be helpful today if you would just start with the basics and tell us who you filed the lawsuit against and why you filed it against them.
Sure, Amanda. And so I want to also tell you about the kind of claims that I filed, because it's a little bit tricky in Texas. So negligence is generally for a car wreck or, some kind of premises liability, slip and fall, corporate misconduct. And in Texas, I cannot sue the police or the school district for just straight negligence, even though clearly they were negligent. They were recklessly negligent. But in Texas, police and the school have immunity, which means it's actually been written into law in Texas. You cannot sue them. And so what I have to do is file a civil rights case. And so that is tricky also because it's a different standard. And how you file a civil rights case is you say, these children had a right to be free. They had a right to life. They had a right to be protected. And because of the school and the police, they violated the children's constitutional rights. And so embedded in our Constitution is the right to life. We all as Americans have a basic right to life. And that's in the 14th Amendment. It's just one of the principles of the Constitution. So in order to go after police and the school, I have to argue that that constitutional right was violated. So that's sort of the basic case against the police and law enforcement. Now, stepping over to the other side of the track, I also sued the gun maker and the gun store, which was Oasis. And their case is tricky as well because they also have immunity, and immunity just means you can't sue them. They have immunity for a different reason. They have immunity by federal law called PLACA, which is Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. And that says you can't sue a gun maker or a store for something like this. It's a third-party violent crime, and so you cannot sue them. And so I'm having to wind around an exception to PLACA to be able to keep that case alive. So I hope that explains a little bit. It's challenging, it's complex, but people need to understand, especially Texans, you can't sue the police or the school district just for negligence.
Right. Yeah, that's very helpful. So I want to go back a little bit to maybe what you've identified as track one against the school district and the police department and a few other defendants. And so you're filing that under a statute known as 1983. And that under that statute, and I'm going to read it just because to make sure I get it correct, you must allege that the person subjected the plaintiff, in this case the children, to conduct that occurred under the color of law, and that conduct deprived that plaintiff of rights, privileges, or immunities guaranteed by the Constitution. So if you would you explain what the color of law is, what the children were deprived of, and why that immunity doesn't apply?
So color of law, that's such a legalese kind of statute, and it's confusing even for lawyers, but it means that it was the government. So in this case, you have Uvalde police officers, you have Uvalde school officers, you have the Uvalde school police. These are all government actors, so they're under the color of law because they are part of the government. So if they were a private company, for example, if it was a private security guy, I could not file this 1983 case because they'd be a private company, and that could be a straight negligence case. So that's the complexity of that color of law. And then the next part was talking about that they violated some protected right. So now we have to go back to Constitutional Law 101. What are our rights as human beings, as Americans? Well, we have a right to life. We have a right to our life not be taken away unless due process, unless there's a hearing. So like in a criminal context, you can't put someone in jail without their opportunity to be heard. And also, you can't execute someone without their opportunity to be heard. So let's say right to life applies to the children here. They had a right to life. And how you can go after the government for that is because the government deprived them of their right to life. Let's talk about the school, for example. by creating a danger at the school. They didn't lock the school. They didn't have security in place. They had what the Attorney General of the United States says, a template for security. Maybe they just had a draft. They didn't really implement it. So they actually created a danger for these children. And we're talking about 9 and 10-year-olds. So they were essentially locked down in school, not free to leave. And their parents were outside. So school created a danger and violated their right to life because they got hurt. And in that same line of thinking with the police have known since the 90s, late 90s, about Columbine. They know that school mass shootings happen. They know what they're supposed to do. They have active shooter training. And in Uvalde, they actually got money from Texas to do their active shooter training. They got funds from the legislature to do their training. And in some of these guys had just had their training. And so they know what they're supposed to do. They know the possibility of a school massacre can happen. They know what was going on. They knew children was there, school was in session, and they did not act on their training. So that is also a right to life. And also we have the right to freedom as Americans. The kids were on lockdown mode. The children were held in school. Parents outside, you can't come in and get your kids. We're holding on to your kids. So that's almost like a search and seizure under constitutional law, because the kids were being held and they were deprived of their personal freedom to get away and go to their parents. Now, all of this, again, is very complex constitutional law, but just for your viewers to understand that that's what we have to do in this case to be able to hold them accountable in the civil justice system.